Hey friends, this is Michael Boehm with Youth Apologetics Training. Today we're going to continue on with this series on science in the Bible. Today we're going to look at a few contradictions, as in things that people point out in the Bible that say contradict science. I think I'm going to condense all these contradictions down to one episode, because after I started looking through them, most of them, honestly, guys, are forehead slappers. You're going, really? You're going to make a big deal out of that? As in, you look at this alleged contradiction, and anybody with a fraction of a brain can look at that and see what's going on, and it's not a contradiction. It's not a problem at all. For a quick example, here would be one. The Bible says that the earth was created. The Bible says that the vegetations, the plants, the herbs, the trees, the shrubs, they were created on day 3, and yet we find out that the sun was created on day 4. How possibly could the vegetation, how could the plants live without sunlight until the next day? What? That's what I would say to that. Yeah, really? I mean, does your yard go through sometimes some days that, an entire day goes without sunshine? In fact, there's places on this planet that entire days go without sunshine, and plants grow there. Here would be another example. As far as God creating the light, there is day and there is night, but yet the sun is not created until the 4th day. So how can the Bible say that there was evening and there was morning, the first day, the second day, and the third day, if there was no sun? Again, slap your forehead and say, what? Because seriously, that's not what the Bible's trying to say there. Okay? You see that the light was created on the first day. What was that first source of light? Probably God Himself. All right? Whatever the case, you have let's just say some source of light, and you have a rotating planet. What does that give you? Day and night, as long as the light is in a specific fixed spot, right? I mean, there's just so many of these that you're going, really? And gosh, guys, when you look through these websites of the alleged Bible contradictions that have to do with science, I mean, you really stretch it. But let's look at a few that, okay, there might be a little bit of weight to them. How about this one? Looking at Leviticus, chapter 11, verse 20. All right, we read this. Now, I'm going to read it on purpose in a different translation than I normally use, for the purposes of pointing out the contradiction. You see where I'm going with this? Starting in verse 20. All flying insects that walk on all fours are to be detestable to you. There are, however, some winged creatures that walk on all fours that you may eat. Those that have jointed legs for hopping on the ground, of these you may eat any kind of locust, katydid, not even sure how to pronounce that, katydid, cricket, or grasshopper, but all other winged creatures that have 4 legs you are to detest. All right, so here's one of the problems. They're looking at this verse and they're saying insects, and we have that walk on all fours. Problem number 1, insects have 6 legs. Okay, so that's pretty easily explained. Many other versions of the Bible just continue to use the word insect, over and over and over. The King James Bible says creeping things as you read through this passage here. See, the way that we classify things nowadays is not the way things were classified in the Bible. For example, when the Bible talks about fish, that includes everything that swims. All right, so you're going to find that whales and dolphins, they all fit into that category of fish. Jonah was swallowed by a great big fish. Well, it was a whale. Same thing with this passage here. Insects, it's a little bit better translated creeping things, but that creates another problem, because if you look at the King James Version, that first verse here that I read of Leviticus chapter 11 verse 20, it says, all flying fowl that walk on all fours. Okay, so now we got another problem. Where do you see any birds that walk on all fours? Well, that Hebrew word that's being used here, I'm probably going to botch the pronunciation, but it's op, something along those lines, okay, which is used many times in the Bible. It can mean a winged flying creature, all right? It can be used for birds. It can be used for flying bugs, okay? Now, if you read this whole chapter in context, it starts by talking about birds. And then it moves over and actually mentions bats as a bird. That's another one of those issues where, again, the Bible classifies things differently. Bats are not birds, but in the Bible, they're a flying creature, all right? And they fit right in with the birds, all right? But anyway, there's just so many of these type of things. As far as classifications go, you find a lot of these in the Bible, because nowadays we have our own system of classifying animals. It doesn't match up with the Bible. So when the King James talks about fowl, well, okay, that might have been a translation that could have been a little bit better, because when you look at it, yeah, it's referring to a creeping thing that flies. And as you read past that verse, you go from birds, and then it transitions to bugs. And suddenly we're looking at all these creeping things. And it's clear that we're talking about bugs, because the locust and the cricket and the grasshopper are brought up, these little gross little creeping things. I don't know how John the Baptist ever munched on those. But anyway, yuck. I hope I never have to eat those. But I guess you could also bring up, as far as classification problems go, dragons. The Bible talks about dragons all over the place. You find that. And when you start looking at these dragons and how they're described, well, we're talking about dinosaurs here. Yeah, there's a couple of them, specifically Leviathan, that cause people some major problems. There is no way I'm going to be able to get into that in this episode. Needless to say, I do accept that there could have been a creature that could have shot some kind of a flame from its mouth, or smoke. We do have the bombardier beetle, and if you guys have ever looked into that, oh boy, I'm not going to do it justice here, but basically this beetle's got multiple compartments inside of its body. One that has a flammable type chemical, another that's some kind of chemical that's an inhibitor that keeps it from flaming up, and then another chemical that is some kind of a igniter, I think. Oh boy, I'm probably totally botching it. But the point is that there's multiple different chemicals. They're kept separate in different pouches, and then the bombardier beetle, when he is attacked, is able to fire these chemicals out of his hind end at exactly the right moment. They hit mid-air a little ways away from his hind end, so he doesn't burn his little buggy buns. and it fries the animal behind him. It's very effective. If God can do that with a little insect, I would imagine he could probably do that with a dinosaur. Interesting stuff to think about. Well, one of these days I'll bring an expert, somebody who really has studied the subject of dinosaurs in the Bible, dinosaurs in history. We'll get down and dirty with it. But yes, when you look at dinosaurs in the Bible, dragons in the Bible, we're talking about dinosaurs. So anyway, let's move on. In Matthew, it is claimed that the mustard seed is the smallest of all the seeds, which we know there are seeds that are smaller than the mustard seed. Well, is that what Matthew 13:31 is saying? 13:31 and 32. Is it really saying that the mustard seed is the very smallest seed on the planet? Well, let's read it. starting in verse 31. Another parable put Jesus forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. All right, so Jesus calls it the least of all seeds. Just looking at the surface here, kind of sounds like he really is saying that's the very smallest of all the seeds. The word that is translated seeds, least, is mikros, or mikros. I'm probably mispronouncing that. It means small size, quantity, number, least, less, little, small. All right. So, well, wait a minute. Is Jesus really saying here that it is the very smallest of all the seeds? Well, let's compare it to another passage where we see this same word being used. This is in Luke chapter 9, verse 48. And said unto them, Whosoever shall receive this child in my name receiveth me, and whosoever shall receive me receiveth him that sent me. For he that is least among you all, the same shall be great. All right, so in this passage, is Jesus talking about one person on the entire planet? As in, there's somebody who is the absolute least, smallest, most insignificant, the one who is considered to be the least of all who ever lived, ever will live, or maybe just at that time on the planet? I don't think so. And I don't think there's a single person that reads that verse who would take that away. You see what I'm saying? What we're looking at here is a statement or a description of a seed that, well, let's face it, it's a small seed. It's a very small seed, but this is a loose small seed. Okay? You compare that seed to any of the other seeds that are in that region, and you're going to find that it's pretty much in the category of pretty darn small. It is the least among them. All right? Same thing when you're looking at, for he that is least among you all, the same shall be great. All right? Again, we're not talking about the very least of all the people on the planet. There's a little bit of wiggle room here. And I think when people try to make this an issue about the smallest seed on the entire planet, I think you're really grasping at straws. I mean, that's really stretching to try and find something to say is an error in the Bible. We would never hold any other publication to that same standard. You would read over it and think, sure, it's a pretty small seed, right? It's small. It's very, very small. Okay, you get the point? Right, okay, so another problem in the same passage that is brought up is that some Bible translations refer to, when they say that this mustard is a shrub, which King James Version refers to it as an herb. The Bible says that, the King James says that it grows up to a tree. Some people have a problem with that as well, that technically speaking, it's not a tree, right? It doesn't grow up to be a tree. But again, going back to what we were talking about concerning, for example, fish and birds and how bats are lumped in with birds, it is a winged flying creature, okay? Classification systems were a little bit different back then. They had different ways of classifying things. The mustard seed would grow into a plant that was somewhere around 2 to 6 feet tall. Now, a 6 foot tall plant, well, that was pretty much a tree. Okay, that's how they saw it. It's not a big deal. Again, when they're saying tree, they're not talking about our modern classification of what a tree is. Okay? Again, not a big deal. People that try to make a big deal of this are really grasping at straws again. They need to understand that the Bible was written thousands of years ago. They used different words, different terminology, and they had different ways of classifying things. No big deal. So anyway, another one is the Bible and pie. There is an instance back in the Old Testament where the bronze laver is described, and it gives the dimensions, and it turns out that the dimensions do not calculate out to pi. I get into this in my very second, I believe, Bible Contradictions podcast. I believe it was episode 263. So if you want to hear about that, go back and listen to that episode. So I'm going to go ahead and skip over that one. But if you haven't heard that, you might want to check it out, because not only is that supposed alleged Bible contradiction refuted, it's actually pretty fascinating. When you read the passage in context, you don't miss any of the details, and then you do the math. It turns out that it is exactly pi, and it's pretty cool how it works out. So you got to check that out if you haven't heard that. Some people make a big deal about how the Bible says that the moon is a lesser light. Okay, so they're saying, well, the Bible's technically, this sounds like something that a young teenage girl such as my daughter, we broke her of this, but Dad, well, technically, the moon is not a light. Okay, so we had to ban the word technically in our house, okay, for a short period of time. But, okay, so the moon is technically not a light. But if you're out in the middle of the desert or in the wilderness, in the middle of the night, and you look up in the sky, the moon is reflecting the light of the sun, and it is a light to you. Okay? It is a light. It might be that the moon is not producing the light, it is reflecting the light. That is a minor point, and honestly, again, not an issue to debate about. It's like, really? You're going to make a big deal about that? Because, yes, the moon is a light. It's not producing the light, it's reflecting the light, but it's still a light at night. Just like you look up in the sky, it's all dark, and then you just see the moon, and it is a light in the sky. All right? You hear people go out on their porch in the middle of the night and say, wow, it's really bright tonight. The moon is really bright. Or the moon's really lighting up the night. You know, oh boy. Anyway, you guys see where I'm going there. Not a big deal. Some websites will make a big deal about the fact that we have the Earth before the sun, moon, and stars. Okay, well, it's argued that, well, that can't be because it contradicts with the nebular hypothesis of stellar formation. Okay, so it contradicts with a hypothesis. Nobody has ever seen a star form. All right, there's many problems, many challenges to a star forming. You know, think about it. Trying to get everything to, all this debris flying outward in space from a Big Bang to somehow come back together and form a star. One of these days, I will have somebody like Dr. Jason Lyle on my program, one of those guys to talk about star formation as well as a bunch of other interesting stuff with our galaxy and universe. That could be a lot of fun. But I suppose I'll save this alleged problem for that episode so that we can get down and dirty with the science. If I try to wax eloquent scientifically on this subject, I might make a mistake. So we'll bring a pro on that one. Needless to say, I've seen lots of great creation scientists utterly refute the idea that stars can just form. It seems to me like you need two exploding stars to create one new star. That doesn't really add up. Okay, so where did the first two stars come from? Anyway, guys, I'm going to stop right there. Reach the 20-minute mark. Something rather interesting is happening with the ministry as of tomorrow. I'm changing things up. This is an update for you guys because things are going to change. I am no longer going to do the 15-minute style podcast. From here on out, I've heard from too many people that they would prefer that I have longer podcasts, and so I'm going to produce one, sometimes two, but at least one good 45-minute to an hour and 10-minute podcast a week. And so you're going to get about the same amount of content. I think on average you're going to get just a little bit more content from me on this new way that I'm doing this. But in this, I'm going to save me quite a bit of time, one. Two, these podcasts are going to become much more shareable, which I like that idea too, because when people try to share my podcast, well, they only get to share one part, so it gets a little awkward, right? And three, well, I've heard from a lot of you, it makes it a lot easier. You like longer podcasts, and for everybody who wants to download a whole bunch of my podcasts, when they're grouped into larger chunks instead of millions and millions of little tiny 15-minute episodes, it makes it a lot easier to go through and download. Having said that, I do think that I've been threatening to do this for a long time, but I do think I'm going to somehow figure out a way to go through all those old episodes and condense them into larger episodes and really trim down my library. It'll still be the same amount of contents as far as minutes would be concerned, but just less episodes. Make it a little bit easier for everybody to go back and just download a whole bunch of stuff. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. I'm going to go ahead and give this a shot. If it turns out that many people come back and say, no, I really don't like the long format, well, maybe I'll reconsider, but I really like this idea. I really do. And I think it's going to free up a lot more of my time, which is going to allow me to put more efforts into other areas, like writing articles for my website and stuff like that. So anyway, with that, guys, tomorrow I will post my first long episode. From there on out, I think I will be posting every Monday. I think Monday is going to be my day to post, so that'll be one thing about Monday that you can appreciate. And so with that, I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.